So I got to live vicariously through you guys because I wasn't there, and majority of people listening to this right now have to live vicariously through you guys because I don't know how this landed for anybody else on the outside looking in. But Saturday and the build-up for Michigan-Penn State there in State College and the is Jim Harbaugh going to make it to the game? Will they get the temporary restraining order on the suspension for the final 3 games of the season? It was Harbaugh watch. He's 10 minutes away from the stadium. He can be there. It was phenomenal television. Like, I couldn't get enough of it. And I'm just wondering, what was that place like there at Ground Zero with all of that drama going on even before the game kicked off?
I mean, VAR, how do you view it from the Penn State perspective of it?
It was excitement, a ton of excitement. I think the energy that I felt on Saturday before calling the game was really an environment of Happy Valley was going to go crazy when, not if, when we beat Michigan in our stripeout game. We had the fighter jets fly over. We pulled out all the stops. There were a lot of activations there. It was a ton of excitement, and I think I know there was a ton of optimism that you could feel. Like, it was just very, very heavy. The amount of energy and electricity surrounding the game was, it actually was so much. I think there was so much fun being had that you could tell that the stands hadn't even filled up by the kickoff. Like, they were still getting lubed up in the tailgates to go in and watch Penn State win that game. So, it was a great atmosphere. It was a great energy. And it was certainly, if you're a Penn Stater, it was just as great a letdown.
I can give you the perspective, unbiased kind of broadcast was, we literally went into that day not knowing what the show would really look like. I mean, so once the TRO, the temporary restraining order, was filed, after Tony Petitti, the commissioner for the Big Ten, came down with the suspension, there was various sources saying that once they filed the TRO, they thought that they could get a judgment on it in time for Harbaugh to be there on the sideline. And what became kind of a twist to the story that was interesting was Pat Kraft, the athletic director at Penn State, said, look, man, if he walks down, we're not getting in the way. Like, we're not going to put ourselves or inject ourselves into this controversy where we're going to bar Jim Harbaugh from walking on the sidelines, even if they don't get the TRO through. So we're kind of sitting there on the outside saying, well, our entire rundown, which is like our show game plan, if you will, we don't really know what we're going to do because of this decision now, that's obviously what we're leading the show off with. But at any point in time, they could get a ruling on this, potentially allowing Harbaugh to be there. And then that's going to change how you look at this thing. I mean, you're probably trying to find cameras on Harbaugh coming into the stadium. It's going to be like a WWE event, right? He's going to be walking out from behind like the villain. And
here he comes!
Dun, 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 dun.
And so meanwhile, you're trying to do this show where like you're talking about all what's going on in college football. There's a lot of big games that were going on, and yet the centerpiece to all of it was like, what's going to happen with Jim Harbaugh, and how is this going to impact or not impact the game? So it was one of the most interesting, I guess, shows that I've been a part of, only because for the most part, studio shows are really scripted. 80 to 90% of what you put in is getting in. Where when you call a game, it's like 80 and 90% of your prep goes out the window. Because once the game starts, it starts, and there's injuries, and there's twists, there's turns, and things that you just have to follow the game. And so you got to be prepared in everything else you do and prepared really to react. So that was an instance where like it was – you're like kind of flying by the seat of your pants with each segment saying like, all right, what's the update now? What's happening now? There was lawyers involved, right? There's people trying to give you their legal interpretations. You're trying to understand legal interpretations. Like my thing was, from the people that I talked to who are attorneys, and then my experience being a player during the lockout and wanting to educate myself then on the granted kind of separate and how that worked out, but with filing injunctions, is these sorts of things do not clear themselves up fast. Judges don't want to rule on something that doesn't, one, even if it's of serious nature, they don't want to make a judgment or ruling on something without what they feel like is due process. And what became the catchword or catchphrase over the course of Friday, Saturday was Michigan's not getting the due process they deserve with the NCAA investigation and the Big Ten and their punishment. And I think if you looked at the judicial system, they didn't want to do that as well. And so they weren't going to rule on it. I know everyone felt like they had the judges lined up and they're, had Michigan backgrounds and that's what was going to happen. It was never going to happen. Like that sort of thing takes time, whether it was Deflategate or the lockout, like all those sorts of decisions take time. And so I kind of was pretty skeptical of Harbaugh ever being involved in any capacity and was kind of thinking to myself, like, at some point, too, as a head coach, you got to sit back and go, like, am I being the distraction for my team by showing up, whether I can or cannot? Like, at some point, the hay's in the barn, I've got to let Sharon Moore do his job as the interim head coach and my players and my staff focus. The game plan's in place. It really just comes down to a few critical decisions you're going to make and some adjustments. And that was what I thought was kind of most interesting. But, man, I'll tell you this much. The atmosphere in Happy Valley is unique. It's unlike anything else I've been a part of now, going there 2 years in a row. The stripe out is ridiculous. The fans, the students, ridiculous. The setting, ridiculous. I mean, it is one of the coolest places. And you see why people love it and are so passionate about it, and VAR, why you are. Every time we go, I'm like, that place is special. It really, really is. So it couldn't have been any bigger stakes along with the drama. I know it's a long-winded way of putting it, but it was one of the coolest things that I've really been a part of. I should say cool, but more unique things I've been a part of.
Interesting signage, too, as well. Some of the messaging on some of the signs.
By the way, dude, even Matt Canada can't get away from there was probably Canada. 4 different Fire Matt Canada signs. I'm like, geez, dude. I know we're in Pennsylvania, but like this poor guy can't even, like, in a big matchup between Michigan and Penn State, he can't even get away there.
Like, I sent you guys a picture of it, but there was a sign, Matt Leinert's trying to make a point, and there was a sign behind him that just said Jim Harbaugh cheats on his wife. It's like he had no business being there. And just people letting it fly before the game. Should be proud.
And some of these signs they got to take down sometimes, depending on what they're saying. Trust me, there's some really good signs that never make the light of day on TV. So it's always fun to see what these kids come up with, man.
Let it fly during the game. How about that? Because no one was letting it fly during the game.
Go ahead, open up, because I told you back when they lost to Ohio State. I've watched this offense for a period of years now with Mike Yurcich, and people here's the reality: is people are going to get on James Franklin for the management of that game. Like, I thought going for 2 early, poor decision. It's 14-9. Like, what's the point of going for 2 in the first half like that? That made no sense to me. And then when they do decide to go for 2, and you can have a debate about, hey, you're down 24 to 15 at that point. Does it make sense to go for 2 at that moment? Well, one, your earlier decision to go for 2 ended up playing an impact on that decision. And then the swinging gate, that's the play you go with. I just. Like, there were so many times when I looked at the falter of Penn State and not being able to beat Ohio State and win a Big Ten championship, or beat Michigan and win a Big Ten championship. It had to do with their offense. Last time they won the Big Ten championship, Joe Moorhead was their play caller. He's phenomenal. Yeah. And they beat Ohio State and won the Big Ten one year. They lost by 1 the next year. Like, he's the head coach at Akron now, so it'd be hard to maybe pry him away and get him back. But it'd be worth giving him a call, man. Like, throw a bunch of money at him and see if you could bring him back. The quarterback, the talent, that team is too good offensively and defensively not to miss this window of opportunity. And because I really do feel like the decision that James Franklin made was in part probably the pressure on him, but also much needed and unfortunately too late for this season.